Hey everybody, hope your summer is going well. If you returned from your vacation, I hope it was fun and relaxing. If you're getting ready to head out on your vacation, hope it's going to be the same and everything that you're looking for. Was there anything better growing up when the week of a family trip was approaching? Maybe the most looked forward to event of the year when I was a kid. Ocean City, Maryland, to me at 12 years old, that was the greatest thing I'd ever seen at that point. I don't know if some of you might share those same type of memories. And for episode 59 of The Far Middle, we are going to dedicate to an athlete that, once again, like last week, it's an easy decision. So this is coming off of the easy call last week with Jack Lambert for episode 58. And guess what? We don't even have to leave the sport, the team, the defense, or the era that Jack Lambert represented to come up with our dedication for episode 59. I said last week that Jack Lambert was the second best linebacker on the Steelers of the 1970s. That's because the best linebacker on that team was right next to him on the field, and it was his number, Jack Lambert's 58 plus 1. That, of course, was Jack Ham, number 59. Jack Ham was, until a guy named Lawrence Taylor came along, the greatest outside linebacker in the history of the NFL. So we've been on a bit of a linebacker streak lately with our dedications. We had Lawrence Taylor at 56, Lambert at 58, and now Jack Ham at 59. Jack Ham was born and raised in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, not far from where I'm at right now. Blue-collar town in a blue-collar region. He went to Bishop McCord High School. Then he, of course, was off to Penn State out of high school. He helped make linebacker U what it became. He was ranked as the greatest Penn State athlete of all time by alums in 2019, and he was voted on the Mount Rushmore of PSU football players. Now, who was on that Mount Rushmore besides Jack Ham? John Cappelletti, the only Heisman Trophy winner from Penn State. LeVar Arrington, a unbelievably talented and scary linebacker in his own right. And Shane Conlon. So 3 out of those 4 players on the Penn State Mount Rushmore sort of facade, 3 of them were linebackers, again, sort of giving recognition to the nickname of linebacker U. And, of course, Jack Ham was a member of the College Football Hall of Fame. So he goes into the NFL in 71, second-round selection by the Steelers. If you want to come up with words to describe his type of play, I think 2 words would come to mind. First, quick. He's very quick to the ball, sort of right off the snap, and 2, very smart. Those would be the 2 words. Maybe a third, if you want to add one, would be respected. Dobre Szunka, what's that? That's Polish, I believe, for good ham. That was Jack Ham's nickname while he was playing. So you saw a lot of signs hanging through the rafters and the different sections of Three Rivers Stadium during the 70s with that on it. And that was also the name of his fan club in the 1970s. And Jack Ham spent time in the energy industry for years after he had retired. He was a broadcaster as well for Penn State football. Nice man, regional legend. Episode 59 dedicated to the great Jack Ham. Now, as we do every episode with the Far Middle in sort of homage to Dr. James Burke and Connections, that great BBC science series from the 70s, early 80s, let's start connecting dots and showing connections. And we'll start with that Jack Ham dedication and how much of a competitor Jack Ham was and how he thrived in a very competitive sort of meritocracy-based system, whether it was high school level football, college football, and of course the NFL and what he achieved in the pros. Well, now let's flip to something related to that when it comes to competition and meritocracy or lack thereof, and that's education systems, ours versus China's. A few weeks ago, I saw that Chinese students all through China went through the process of taking China's highly competitive college entrance exams across that entire nation. 2022 saw a record number of Chinese students taking the exams, almost 12 million in total. Now, the Chinese university system, it's brutally competitive. Only the best and brightest advance. Any standardized tests and exams are a primary tool used to rank and to screen and to determine who the best and brightest are in a certain order. And ironically, the Chinese educational system, which looks to indoctrinate collectivism, right, it's a communist state, it's a meritocracy. Their educational system is quite the meritocracy. And you can't help but compare what is occurring in China to what our education system is doing in the United States. Our system is dumbing things down. It's erasing meritocracy, and it's going in the exact opposite direction the Chinese education system is embracing. So in the United States, what do you see everywhere you look these days across our educational framework? Well, you see major public school districts in our largest cities, they're dropping entrance proficiency exams for those STEM-focused or drama-focused, arts-focused, academically focused schools within those districts. You saw this in New York City in a big way, you're seeing it in San Francisco, and you're basically seeing it everywhere in between. Now slots are going to be allotted in those coveted programs through a lottery system or some other arbitrary means, or looking at some other thing other than how the students are prepared and how they scored with the perspective, with curriculum that would be applicable to that program. And then if you look at something like AP or advanced placement courses, they're under attack everywhere you look. And they're being demoted in what colleges consider increasingly when reviewing applicants into the university and college systems. Class rankings are another thing that's under attack, and that's both in high school and in universities. They're frankly becoming a thing of the past. It's like we don't want to hurt the feelings of students, so in the end, everybody is going to be deemed special, everybody becomes special. And then, of course, there's no more SATs or ACTs at many elite institutions. Why? Well, they say because they're biased or they give an unfair advantage. But we all know, I think, the real reason is dropping these tests. It gives the university bureaucracy way more subjective discretion to admit or reject whoever they feel like without having to answer tough questions like, why did you reject a more accomplished, higher scoring student? Now, for something like unaccountable academia, the solution is always going to be something like this, where you get to just sort of make the issue go away altogether through, in this instance, dropping the tests. Now, the net result of all this, it's a cumulative dilution, it's a watering down, and it's transforming what was a meritocracy in U.S. education and replacing it with a collectivist system. No one will win or benefit in the end other than the bureaucrats and the administrators within the academic complex itself. Then, when these students suffer the consequences after exiting the system with no decent job and massive student debt, the system, the educational system, is going to demand the taxpayer forgive the debt and pick up the tab. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. So today I ask you, who has the more virtuous and meritocracy-based education system, China or the United States? And then remind me, which one is the capitalist, free market-based, individual rights-focused country, and which one is the communist state? Couldn't tell it from the educational systems. And this comparing and contrasting of educational systems within China and the United States brings us to our next connection, our next dot, and that is the subject of competing with China. Because as bad as what's going on within the educational system is, worse yet, it often seems that our leaders in America do all they can to assist our adversary, that is the Chinese Communist Party, and weaken us domestically. Now, we could cite dozens of examples of this in the past 18 months that have occurred, but I'll just throw out one in the interest of time for episode 59. Sometime earlier this year, it was February or March, the House passed the America Competes Act. Now, the touted justification for the act was to assist the United States in competing with China. Now, that sounds awesome, doesn't it? Why should we be apprehensive? Because the bill had little to nothing to do with its warranted title and cause. Instead, the bill was laden with funding for partisan programs and efforts, many of which would have the exact opposite effect of making us more competitive with China. Instead, it would weaken us. And my favorite example within that bill, or the proposed bill, was funding the United Nations Green Climate Fund. That would help China at worst, and we waste a ton of money to an unaccountable program at best. It would not in any way help the United States compete with anyone, let alone China. And all this talk about the educational system in the United States, and then America competes and how it competes with rivals like China, I'm going to keep pulling on this string, and it leads us to our next point, because a big problem with our education system is that it's tightly controlled. It's a monopoly that is run to serve the interest of the administrator and the bureaucrat and the public union leader and the politician and the government. It does not exist to serve the great teacher or the student or the parents or the taxpayer. So when you see Congress going forward with this orgy of spending found in things like the America Competes Act, it often focuses, in the end, when you get down to the details, on shoveling huge sums of dollars, directly and indirectly, in the form of subsidy to this monopoly, this educational monopoly, that fails in its original purpose and its duty. And this is, make no mistake about it, an ugly, blatant monopoly. Less than 4% of students in this nation are enrolled in something that is the result of a private education choice, which means more than 96% are stuck in the monopoly designed not to develop them as a student, but to serve other interests counter to the development and the interests of the student themselves. Now, the idea of school choice, it's been around for a while. It was really kickstarted back in the 1950s by one of my idols, the great economist Milton Friedman and his wife Rose. Now, their idea I thought was pretty cool and pretty sort of forward-thinking for the time. They wanted to provide parents with dollar vouchers or credits that would equate in its sum to what it would cost to educate the child in a public school that could then be spent as long as it went toward the child's education in an approved institution. So what the great economist and Rose, what they wanted to do was to establish an educational marketplace. Markets work. Competition works. To, do something that would be what the Help America Competes Act was supposed to be doing. Then, in the 1990s, if you fast forward from the 50s, when the Friedmans first started to put together this idea of school choice, in the 1990s, Wisconsin gave this idea a go at scale in the city of Milwaukee. And it was a voucher-based program for students to opt out of public school and to attend private or charter schools. Now, the public unions hated it, but what the effort showed was that parents loved having choice for their kids' education. I guess that's a shocker. We shouldn't be surprised by that. And today, the idea of school choice, it's as popular as ever. That's because the failing of our public education systems and how it serves the interests of others than the students and others than great teachers and others other than the parents and taxpayers, that came to full exposure under the heat lamp that was COVID pandemic and the shutdowns. So barring kids from months and years of in-person education, when younger citizens faced little major risk from COVID, it provided provided insight and proved what this educational system values and what it does not value. Now, recent polls show that 74% of voters support school choice, and before pandemic, it was about 64%. So it was already very popular before pandemic. It's just become more so since then, and with the shutdowns that ensued. 54% of Americans are dissatisfied with K through 12 education. Put me in that group, and it was 47% before pandemic. So it's another sort of key metric or question where it's ticked up coming off of the shutdowns. And the percentage of kids homeschooled, I don't know if you were aware of this or not, it doubled through the pandemic. So it's now over 11%, which is significant. So if you're on in person, what is there to lose with homeschooling? I think that's how a lot of parents and families are looking at this. That's likely what many parents were thinking. You can't blame them. And I'm sure much of this growth in homeschooling was due to those parents working from home during the pandemic and hearing and seeing what was being taught to their kids on the Zoom videos. And when parents saw and heard that, they likely were shocked and angered to action, driven towards something like homeschooling or school choice. And these issues swirling around public education, they bring up another point, another dot to connect. And that deals with the rights of the individual in America in the year 2022. So I think a lot of you know I'm quite liberal when it comes to individual rights. I don't subscribe to many lifestyle options or opinions that are out there, but I feel that the government or the majority should not be allowed to dictate whether the individual chooses those options. So this could be something with respect to speech, sexual orientation, whatever. In the end, this is America. We've got free will, we got freedom of expression, we got freedom of choice. Agree or disagree, but don't dictate through government and coercion. And by the way, government coercion is redundant. It is one and the same, those two words. Don't dictate through that type of coercion what's acceptable and what is not. Well, this issue has spilled into education in a big way. So the system, the government, the left, they decided that parents do not have a say in what their kids are being taught or when they are being taught it. Now, you saw this manifest itself in the governor's race in Virginia not long ago between Terry McAuliffe and who is now Governor Youngkin. McAuliffe was called out for vetoing legislation in the past that would have required schools to inform parents about sexually explicit content in teaching materials. And this call out or challenge happened in a debate. McAuliffe responded with, "I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach." Now, that was a pivotal moment that probably determined the election outcome. But it was more telling to me in that it shows how entrenched this idea of the state and the system and the bureaucracy, how it all collectively knows better than their client, which is the parent and the taxpayer. And this issue has not gone away now that the Virginia governor race is concluded. Quite the contrary. Earlier this year, the Michigan Democratic Party posted the following statement on social media, and I'm going to quote from it because I think it's very telling. So the message said, quote, "The purpose of a public education in a public school is not to teach kids only what parents want them to learn. It is to teach them what society needs them to know. The client of the public school is not the parent, but the entire community, the public," end quote. Ouch. That post was deleted quickly after it was put up there, and at least it was honest, I'll give it that. And guess who gets to decide what society needs kids to know? And guess who gets to decide what is in the best interest of the community? Yep, you guessed it. The leftist politician, the bureaucrat, the public union leader. That's a community that I don't want to be a part of. So education, which again, I guess in some ways has turned out to have been the theme of episode 59 so far, it's got major competitive implications on the global stage. You get education right, we get better competitively, and Russia and China and the rest of the globe would have to take note. We get education wrong, and we are going to be hindered, and we may lose in the global rat race to our peers or adversaries, which brings up the next topic that I want to speak to, which is Ukraine and Russia. I am very worried. Russia, of course, first invaded. I thought for sure it would be over quick. I was wrong. I was happy to be wrong. Ukraine held in there and fought the good fight. Kyiv was saved. Russia looked inept militarily. But, over time, something has become very apparent, and that is that Russia is all in when it comes to the Ukraine. They are fully committed. And the West isn't even half in, and it isn't even half committed. How do you know this? Well, Russia throws missiles, we hold benefit concerts. Russia levels cities, the West gives speeches. Russia kills citizens, we hold Zoom video calls with President Zelensky. Russia resupplies its ammunition, we talk about more munitions but never get around to sending it to the Ukraine. Russia finances all of this with energy exports. The West talks about sanctions, but still has to buy its energy from Russia due to flawed energy policies in the West. And as a recent article put it, the West protests and then forgets. Russia, I think, and I fear, is going to win, and it'll do so over the long haul instead of the quick win that it might have hoped for. Eastern Ukraine is looking like it may fall. With it will go vast energy reserves, whether it's natural gas or condensate or coal, and port infrastructure on the Black Sea will also go with it. And it's going to basically be a launching point to take over the rest of the Ukraine that's left whenever Russia feels like it. And energy, again, it's like education. You get energy policy and the strategic map of energy right, and you win globally. You get them wrong, and it's likely game over for you in the loser bin. If Russia prevails in eastern Ukraine, its energy dominance over the EU will have grown, and the EU and the US continue to chase damaging energy policies that put even more power in the hands of Russia and China. And that power will be wielded, and we will not like the results, whether it be the rest of Ukraine or Taiwan or worse. These views on energy policy takes me to the next dot to connect, and that's how there is a growing body of evidence that is exposing a common theme found with fraudsters in big business. I just watched some of The Dropout, which is an 8-part series on Elizabeth Holmes and her Theranos scheme. And what was interesting to me is how when you roll everything else away, all the optics and distractions, you peel them away. In the end, Holmes does what most fraudsters and snake oil salesmen do. They offer up a fake benevolence. They promote their scheme as a way to solve a pressing problem that hits at the altruistic allure that we all share to some degree. And with Theranos, it was bringing health to the masses through the instant blood tests, sort of democratizing healthcare, whether it was healthcare quality, speed of the results, or the accuracy of them. And you see this in other areas beyond healthcare and beyond Theranos. The electric vehicle industry and the crazy market valuations of public companies in that space that haven't produced EVs to scale, Why are they there? Why are they valued at those levels? Because they exist to save the planet. It's that altruistic allure. Climate change policies, they're pushed to what? To avoid the code red for everyone, including future generations, that altruistic theme. Government programs and entitlements, you see them there. They're often created to address, under the justification of addressing poverty and to address inequality across all kinds of demographics. Careers are made of this stuff. Power is created from it. Billions, trillions of dollars are built from it. Because in the end, like the X-Files, if you remember the X-Files and what they used to say, we all want to believe. What do we want to believe? We want to believe that the false solution to the hype problem is real, and you see really smart people with lots of power, influence, and money. They believe these types of things. They believed Holmes when it came to Theranos, and they lost a lot. They lost a lot monetarily, and they also lost a lot reputationally. And it continues to happen time and time again. Now, where do you think the next one will blow up or be exposed? Is it going to be the value of a college education? Will that be exposed? Will it be the need for solar on every rooftop? Will it be Bitcoin and crypto? Some unicorn tech company like we saw with WeWork? Will we see more of those? Or some SPAC? Take your pick, because your guess is going to be as good as mine. But rest assured, it will definitely happen, or is happening again and as we speak. Now, these issues of tricksters and fraudsters and this fake benevolence brings us to the next topic, because a lot of those types of individuals and schemes, they tend to end up in politics. And I saw something from one of them, one of those politicians, that I just had to share with the constant listeners on episode 59 of the Far Middle podcast. It's going to be hard to believe, this isn't a joke, but Governor Hochul, who is up there running New York State after Cuomo left in a cloud of controversy, she announced a while back that people with a record of arrest for marijuana-related offenses, they're going to be first in line when it comes to dishing out the state marijuana retail licenses. Because again, New York has legalized marijuana. So what's that again? Does that make any sense? Yep, you heard it right. Now, why is the governor of New York considering putting those with marijuana-related offenses and arrest records first in line for these retail licenses as the state starts to provide these licenses to sell marijuana? Well, she and her proponents say that giving first shot to prior offenders, it's fair and it's logical. They say it's good business sense, and the offenders were the most impacted by the war on drugs. And this, putting them first in line for retail licenses to sell marijuana, it serves as a form of payback or restitution to them for breaking the law. And it's great job retraining, putting their illegal skills to work legally. So let's think this through. You broke drug laws in the past. Let's say you were a drug dealer. Your specialty, right, was breaking laws, while someone owning a retail license for marijuana needs to be good at and have a specialty in following laws. Your specialty was tax evasion, while the retail license owner, they need to be good at tax compliance. The drug dealer, or the prior drug dealer, was good at using force, where here on the retail level, you don't want to see merchants muscling their clients. Retail marijuana will be a highly regulated endeavor, whereas illegal drug dealing did not have regulations that you worried about. And even if none of this were true, why in the heck do you want to reward the person who didn't follow the law over one who followed the law when doling out these retail licenses for marijuana sales? It's another reason why, although I am not anti-marijuana because I'm pro-individual rights and socially liberal, as I said earlier, I do have serious concerns about how all this turns out when government gets involved and we don't think things through. So it's crazy, it's nuts, but welcome to the New York state of mind in 2022. It is time to wrap episode 59, and I just referenced New York state of mind. That brings to my mind Billy Joel, one of my favorite musical performers. July, interestingly, was when he released his greatest hits of Volume 1 and 2. That has been an epic seller for him. And I've always had a love-hate relationship with the greatest hit album concept and these compilations of greatest hits. So on one hand, they are often no-skip records from start to finish. You'll listen to every single track. They're all awesome songs. But on the other hand, you miss so much if you don't get to know the full albums of the artist. So greatest hits are a compilation, in the end, in my mind, of a popularity contest for listeners. But if you like the act enough to buy their greatest hits, you're inevitably going to like their fuller works and parts of the catalog that don't make the greatest hits. So to prove the point, here are Billy Joel songs that are not on his greatest hit albums. Summer Highland Falls, Vienna, Los Angelinos, An Innocent Man, and my favorite Billy Joel song, The Great Suburban Showdown, which is from Street Life Serenade. So if you like Billy Joel, you're going to need to know these songs because you'll love them by inference, and you're not going to find them on his Greatest Hits Volume 1 and 2. So Greatest Hits, in a way, I guess they serve their purpose, but if you get hooked on the act through the medium of the Greatest Hits album, you owe it to yourself to explore deeper with the individual albums. You'll be happy that you did. And then here's a little bit of Greatest Hits trivia for you. So what's the best-selling album of all time in the United States? It's the Eagles' Greatest Hits Volume 1. What is the first Greatest Hits album that was put out there? Johnny Mathis, his Greatest Hits in 1958. And what is the biggest selling album of all time in the UK? Queen's Greatest Hits. And guess what? I own all three of those. And I couldn't stand the thought of not knowing the catalog of those acts beyond their greatest hits. Okay, our work is done here for this week in episode 59. Stay cool and talk again next week.